She was a woman who lived a very simple life. She was not the kind of person who stood out in a crowd, nor did she want to. She wore plain clothes, preferred quiet corners, and rarely tried to draw attention to herself. Most of the time, people walked past her without noticing, and that suited her just fine. Yet deep inside, she carried dreams, even if they were small ones. She wanted to feel stronger, to trust her own body, and to know she could protect herself if ever a day came when she needed to. Her life had always been about caring for others. She worked, cooked, cleaned, and kept her little world moving in order. But sometimes, when she sat quietly at night, she wondered about the strength she had never tested. She remembered moments in her past when she felt weak, when she wished she could stand up and not rely on anyone else. Those moments planted a seed in her heart, and though she never admitted it to anyone, she wanted to try something different, something that could show her what she was made of. One evening, while scrolling on her phone, she saw a short video clip of women practicing a martial art called Jiu-Jitsu. They were smaller than their partners, yet they used skill and technique to control even stronger opponents. She watched one woman roll gracefully on the mat, escape from under someone twice her size, and end the match with a calm smile. That scene captured her attention. She whispered to herself, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." For days, the thought followed her. She was not athletic, not flexible, and certainly not confident in sports. But jiu-jitsu was not about big muscles or fast punches, it was about patience, leverage, and intelligence. It was about learning how to use the body wisely, no matter its size. Something about that gave her hope. She began to imagine herself in a class, wearing a gi, trying to follow along. The picture in her mind was both exciting and frightening. At last, she gathered her courage. She searched online for a nearby jiu-jitsu academy and found one just a short distance from her home. The pictures of the gym looked serious, men in uniforms, belts tied around their waists, sweat on their faces as they trained hard. For a moment, she almost closed the page, thinking, "This is not for me." But then she reminded herself that courage was not about being ready, it was about taking the first step even when you didn't feel ready. On the first day she walked into the academy, her heart was racing. The mat smelled faintly of cleaning spray, and the sound of people laughing and moving filled the room. Everyone seemed to know each other, greeting one another with hugs or nods. She stood there quietly, clutching her borrowed gi, unsure of where to go. A coach noticed her and came forward with a kind smile. "First day?" he asked. She nodded shyly. "Don't worry," he said. "Just follow along, and you'll learn." The class began with warm ups. They ran laps, did push ups, and practiced rolls. She stumbled through each exercise, struggling to keep up. Her body felt heavy, her arms weak, and she noticed that some students glanced at her with raised eyebrows. A couple of whispers passed around, and though she could not hear the words, she felt the sting of being judged. She kept her head down and pushed through the discomfort. When it was time to practice techniques, she was paired with a young man who looked confused to have her as a partner. His smile was half polite, half doubtful. He went through the motions, showing her where to put her hands, how to move her hips, but he did not take her seriously. She noticed it, but she said nothing. Inside, however, a small fire started to burn. Every movement felt awkward. Her gi sleeves got tangled, her hair fell into her eyes, and her legs seemed too slow to follow the coach's instructions. She felt clumsy, like a guest in a world that did not belong to her. Yet beneath the embarrassment, there was a strange sense of excitement. She was learning something new, something outside her daily routine. At the end of class, when everyone sat in a circle, sweaty and tired, she looked around at the faces. Most were friendly, but a few carried the look of disbelief, as if asking why someone like her had even stepped into this place. That night, As she walked home with aching muscles, she wondered if she should return. The easier choice would be to stop, to tell herself it was not meant for her, and to go back to the comfort of her ordinary life. But deep inside, she heard a small voice. It said, "You wanted strength, and strength never comes easily. Keep going." She went back the next day, and the day after that. Each time she entered the gym, she felt the same mixture of nerves and determination. Some people ignored her, others quietly laughed when she failed a drill, but she kept moving. She reminded herself that every expert was once a beginner, and maybe her journey would be slower, but it was hers. Though she did not realize it then, the first steps she took into that gym would change her life. They would lead her into challenges that tested her patience, moments of ridicule that would hurt her deeply, and also to a victory she never could have imagined. But at that time, she was just a simple woman in an oversized GI, trying to learn one move at a time, carrying nothing but her quiet determination and the courage to keep coming back. She continued to attend her classes, showing up week after week, even when her body ached and her mind told her to stay home. At first, she thought the hardest part would be learning the movements, but she soon discovered that the real challenge was something deeper. It was the way people looked at her, the quiet comments made behind her back, and the subtle laughter when she failed at something simple. The gym was full of strong, confident people. Most of them had been training for years. They carried themselves with pride, their belts wrapped tightly around their waists, each color showing their progress. She, on the other hand, was still a beginner, a white belt who often got lost in the drills. To her, it was a place of learning. To some of them, it was a place of competition and ego. That difference showed in the way they treated her. During one class, the coach asked the students to pair up for sparring. Everyone quickly grabbed their usual partners. She stood there waiting, hoping someone would call her name. A few students glanced at her, then turned away, choosing someone else. For a moment, she thought she would be left alone. Finally, one man agreed to partner with her, but the way he rolled his eyes before stepping forward made her heart sink. He treated the round like a joke, moving lazily, smirking when she tried to grab his sleeve, and letting out exaggerated sighs whenever she failed. Others nearby noticed, and a small group chuckled quietly. She pretended not to hear, but the sound stung. She often walked home from class with her thoughts heavy. Why were they laughing at her? What harm was she doing by being there? She was not trying to prove she was better than anyone else. She only wanted to learn, to grow, to discover the strength inside her. Yet the ridicule kept coming, small and sharp, like stones thrown at her spirit. There was one student in particular, a black belt who held himself as if he were above everyone else. He was skilled, no one could deny that, but his pride was louder than his talent. He spoke with authority, often correcting others in front of the class even when the coach had not asked him to. When he noticed her, his smirk was the widest. He once muttered to a friend, loud enough for her to hear, "She doesn't belong here. This is not for people like her." She lowered her head and stayed quiet, but inside her chest, something twisted. She felt shame, but also a quiet resistance. Maybe she did not belong yet, but she would not let someone else decide her worth. The ridicule did not stop at words. Sometimes during drills, her partners would refuse to take her seriously. Instead of teaching her gently, they would overpower her with strength, making her feel like a rag doll. Other times, they would go too easy on her, treating her as if she were a child, not worth real effort. Both ways hurt. She did not want pity, and she did not want cruelty. She just wanted respect, the same kind they gave each other. One evening, she came home so tired she wanted to quit. Her body was sore, her knees bruised from the mats, and her heart was heavy from the laughter that had followed her again that day. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. She could already hear the excuses she could make: she was too busy, too old, too weak. No one would question her if she stopped going. They would forget about her quickly. The gym would continue, the classes would run, and she would fade away unnoticed. But then she remembered why she had started. She had wanted strength, not only in her body but in her heart. If she quit now, she would return to the same life where she doubted herself, where she stayed quiet in the face of challenges. She realized that the very people laughing at her were giving her a choice: either let their ridicule define her, or let it push her to grow. The next day, she returned. She stepped onto the mat with the same quiet expression, but inside, she carried a new decision. She would no longer care about the whispers or the smirks. She would use them as fuel. Each time someone laughed, she would practice harder. Each time someone doubted her, she would sharpen her focus. And so she began to change, not on the outside, but deep within. She listened carefully to the coach, memorizing every detail. When she went home, she replayed the lessons in her mind. She watched videos late at night, studying how smaller fighters used timing and technique to defeat bigger opponents. She practiced alone in her living room, rolling on the carpet, drilling grips, and visualizing escapes. Slowly, her clumsy movements began to smooth out. The ridicule did not disappear, but her reaction to it did. Instead of feeling crushed, she started to feel challenged. Every smirk became a reminder that she had more to prove, not to them, but to herself. Every whisper behind her back became a reason to show up again. She started to smile quietly when she heard them, because she knew they could not see what was happening inside her. There was a day when the coach paired her again with the arrogant black belt. He laughed as they bowed, clearly amused by the idea of sparring with her. The others around watched with interest, expecting an easy show. She felt her heart racing, but instead of shrinking, she told herself to breathe, to focus. She reminded herself of the countless hours she had practiced alone, the quiet nights when she had studied the art carefully. He rolled with arrogance, moving quickly, expecting her to fall apart. And she did struggle. He was stronger, faster, and more experienced. But unlike before, she did not panic. She stayed calm, holding her ground, defending each move. She did not beat him, not yet, but she lasted longer than anyone expected. When the round ended, he smirked again, but less than before. Others in the gym exchanged glances, realizing she was not as helpless as they had thought. Walking home that night, she felt something shift. The ridicule still hurt, but now it was no longer the only sound she heard. Beneath it, she could hear her own quiet determination, steady and unshaken. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she had already survived the hardest part: not the drills, not the bruises, but the laughter that tried to push her away. She was still a simple woman in many ways, unnoticed outside the gym, ordinary in her daily life. But inside, she was changing. The ridicule that once tried to break her was slowly becoming the fire that would shape her strength. And though no one around her realized it yet, she was preparing for a moment that would surprise them all. She had made a decision deep in her heart. If she was going to continue, she would not only attend classes, she would also dedicate herself outside of the gym. She knew she could not match others in size or strength, but she had something different, something many of them had lost: patience and persistence. She was willing to put in the quiet work that no one else would notice. After every class, when others went out to eat or talk, she walked home alone with her GI folded in her bag. Her body was often sore, her knees bruised, her shoulders aching, but she carried herself with a quiet determination. As soon as she arrived home, she replayed every move in her mind. She would sit on her bed and close her eyes, imagining the drills step by step: how to grip the sleeve, how to shift her hips, how to escape from underneath. She knew her memory was one of her strengths, so she used it to sharpen every detail the coach had taught. Her small living room became her private training ground. She laid down a thick blanket or sometimes an old yoga mat and practiced movements alone. She rolled sideways, drilled shrimping across the floor, and shadow grappled against invisible opponents. To anyone else, it might have looked silly, but to her it was serious work. Each practice was a promise to herself, a reminder that she could improve even when no one was watching. Late at night, when the world outside was quiet, she sat with her phone in her hands, watching jiu-jitsu matches online. She paid attention to the smaller fighters, the ones who had to rely on technique rather than size. She studied how they moved, how they set traps, how they stayed calm even in difficult positions. She would pause the videos, rewind them, and practice the motions slowly in her living room. Hours passed without her noticing, and though her body grew tired, her heart grew stronger. Her family noticed the change in her routine. Sometimes they asked why she spent so much time practicing when she was already tired from work. She smiled softly and said, "Because I don't want to give up." They didn't fully understand her reasons, but they could see the quiet fire in her eyes. At the gym, she remained quiet. She did not brag, she did not show off. She let the others laugh if they wanted to. What they didn't know was that she had been training far beyond the classes. When the coach taught a new move, she often already knew the basics from her late-night studies. Her body was learning faster, her reactions were sharper, and she began to surprise some of her training partners. There was a day when she was paired with a stronger student who had always mocked her before. He expected an easy round, but this time, she defended well. She escaped from positions that had once trapped her. She countered small movements with quiet precision. He still beat her, but his smirk faded as he realized she was not the same beginner he thought she was. She walked home that day with a small smile, not because she had won, but because she had proved to herself that her secret training was paying off. Her journey was not easy. There were nights when she felt too tired to practice. Some evenings she looked at her mat on the floor and thought about skipping. But then she remembered the voices in the gym, the whispers that said she did not belong. She thought of the black belt who had laughed at her. Those memories gave her strength to stand up and keep going. She told herself that every small drill at home was building a foundation for something greater. Over time, her mindset began to change. She no longer saw herself as weak or clumsy. She started to see herself as a student on a path. Each mistake became a lesson, each failure a step forward. She learned that progress was not about being the strongest in the room but about being stronger than yesterday. That thought comforted her and kept her going. Her coach noticed the change too. During one class, he paused to watch her spar. He saw how calmly she defended, how carefully she moved, and how her focus never broke even when under pressure. After the round, he gave her a small nod of approval. It was not loud praise, but to her, it meant everything. It was proof that her effort was visible, even if only to those who truly paid attention. Outside the gym, her training gave her a new sense of confidence. She walked with her head a little higher, carried herself with more ease, and no longer avoided eye contact. She began to notice that strength was not only physical, it was also in the way she handled herself in life. When faced with stress or challenges at work, she breathed deeply, just like she did on the mats, and stayed calm. Jiu-Jitsu was shaping not only her body but also her spirit. Still, the ridicule did not disappear completely. Some students continued to doubt her. Some even whispered that she was wasting her time. But now, she did not feel hurt in the same way. Instead, she felt motivated. She knew something they did not, that beyond the visible, beyond the laughter, she was quietly sharpening herself like a blade hidden in the dark. Her secret practice continued. Every night, she drilled until sweat covered her face. Every morning, she stretched her sore muscles before heading to work. She read books and articles about Jiu-Jitsu philosophy, about patience, discipline, and the idea of yielding to overcome strength. These words stayed with her. She understood that her journey was not only about winning matches but also about transforming her character. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, her efforts began to shine. During sparring, she surprised more people. She escaped submissions that once crushed her, and she caught others off guard with simple techniques executed with perfect timing. She still lost often, but her growth was undeniable. Even the arrogant black belt began to notice that she was no longer the same woman he had once dismissed. One evening, after class, she stayed back to practice alone on the mats. The lights were dim, the gym almost empty, and her movements echoed softly in the room. She practiced the same submission again and again, drilling it until it became part of her body. She imagined herself in a real fight, calm and patient, waiting for the perfect moment. Sweat dripped down her face, but she smiled. In that quiet space, she realized she was building something powerful. Her hidden struggle was no longer just about enduring ridicule. It had become about transforming herself. She was proving, day by day, that strength is not always loud or visible. Sometimes, strength grows in silence, in lonely practice, in quiet determination that no one applauds. And though no one around her could see it fully yet, she was preparing for a moment that would shock them all, a moment that would show the true result of every late-night drill and every ounce of patience she had carried. The months of training had slowly built a quiet confidence inside her. She was still the same simple woman who walked into the gym with modest clothes and a shy smile, but something within her had changed. She no longer trembled when she stepped on the mat. She no longer felt the sting of laughter as sharply as before. She carried her secret hours of practice like a hidden shield, and even though no one else saw the full picture, she knew how far she had come. Then one evening, without warning, the moment she had been unknowingly preparing for arrived. The coach announced that the class would end with live sparring rounds. Each person would rotate through different partners, testing themselves against whoever was in front of them. The gym buzzed with energy, as students tied their belts tighter and cracked jokes with their friends. She tied her belt too, though her hands felt a little shaky. When her turn came, the coach looked at her, then looked at the arrogant black belt who had mocked her so many times before. With a slight smile, he said, "You two, spar together." The air in the room shifted. Some students raised their eyebrows in surprise. Others smirked, whispering to each other. Everyone expected the round to be a joke, a short and easy victory for the black belt. He himself grinned widely, clearly amused by the pairing. He bowed with exaggerated politeness, then smirked as he stepped forward, as if this would be nothing more than entertainment. She bowed too, but her expression was calm, almost serene. Inside, her heart was racing. She knew how skilled he was, how much experience he carried. But she also knew that she had prepared for this moment in her own quiet way. Every late-night drill, every invisible practice, every drop of sweat in her small living room had been for moments like this. The coach clapped his hands, and the round began. The black belt moved quickly, trying to overwhelm her with his speed and strength. He expected her to crumble, as she had before. But this time, she stayed calm. She defended carefully, using her legs and arms with precision. He pushed harder, leaning in, but she breathed deeply and focused on her technique. Her body moved almost on its own, guided by countless hours of practice. At first, the others laughed lightly, thinking it would be over soon. But then something unexpected happened. She slipped out of his grip with smooth timing. She used a small opening to set her frame, and before he realized it, she had turned the tables. The laughter faded, replaced by silence. Everyone leaned forward to see what was happening. The black belt frowned, suddenly realizing she was not as easy to control as before. He tried to crush her with his weight, but she stayed patient. She waited for his pressure to overcommit, and in that moment, she moved. Her body flowed with precision, her grip found its place, and her legs wrapped into the perfect position. In a flash, she set the submission. It was sharp, clean, and executed with flawless timing. The black belt's eyes widened in shock. He tried to escape, twisting and pushing, but her technique was locked tight. He had no choice. Within seconds, his hand tapped the mat. The room fell silent. No one could believe what they had just seen. A simple woman, the one many had ridiculed, had submitted a black belt, and not after a long struggle, but in only 14 seconds. She released the hold immediately and sat back, her breathing steady. She did not jump up in triumph, she did not shout, and she did not boast. She simply bowed her head respectfully, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone else knew it was extraordinary. The black belt sat up slowly, his face red with embarrassment. For the first time, his arrogance was gone. He had underestimated her, and in doing so, he had been caught. He gave her a small nod, a gesture of reluctant respect, before standing and adjusting his belt. Around the mat, the other students whispered in disbelief. Some looked at her with wide eyes, others with quiet admiration. The same people who had once laughed at her now struggled to understand how she had done it. They had not seen the long nights of training, the endless drills, the hours of study. They had not seen the hidden struggle she had carried all alone. To them, it looked like a miracle. To her, it was simply the result of persistence. She left the mat quietly, her heart pounding but her face calm. Inside, she felt a mixture of emotions: relief, pride, and disbelief all at once. She had not set out to prove anyone wrong, but in that one moment, she had done more than she ever dreamed possible. She had shown that strength is not about size or reputation, but about discipline, patience, and heart. That night, as she walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, she replayed the moment in her mind. 14 seconds. It seemed unreal, yet she knew it had happened. She thought of all the times she had been laughed at, all the moments when she had been told she didn't belong. Every whisper, every smirk, every moment of ridicule had pushed her to work harder, and now it had all led to this. She didn't feel anger toward those who had mocked her. Instead, she felt gratitude. Without their doubt, she might not have worked so hard. Without their laughter, she might not have pushed herself to train when no one was watching. In some strange way, their ridicule had helped build her strength. When she returned to class the next day, the atmosphere was different. People no longer ignored her. They greeted her with nods, some even with hesitant smiles. A few students approached her quietly, asking questions about her technique, wanting to learn how she had done it. Even the black belt, though still proud, treated her with more respect than before. But she remained humble. She didn't brag or act superior. She simply continued to train, bowing to her partners, listening carefully to the coach, and practicing as she always had. To her, the victory was not about defeating someone else. It was about proving to herself that she belonged, that her hard work had meaning. The unexpected challenge had come, and she had faced it with courage. What had once seemed impossible had become reality. And though many saw it as a single moment of surprise, she knew the truth: it was not luck, not chance, but the result of countless hidden hours of dedication. She went to bed that night with a calm smile. She was still the same simple woman, but she carried within her a story that would inspire not only herself but also anyone who heard it. A story of quiet strength, of perseverance, and of an unforgettable moment when doubt was silenced in just 14 seconds. The gym was never quite the same after that day. Word spread quickly about what had happened, not because she told anyone, but because others couldn't stop talking about it. People whispered about how the quiet woman had submitted a black belt in 14 seconds. Some exaggerated the story, adding more drama than was true, while others downplayed it, calling it luck. But for those who had seen it with their own eyes, there was no denying the truth. She had done something that no one thought she could. For her, life continued almost as usual. She still woke up early, went to work, and returned home to her small space where she quietly lived her days. But inside her, something had changed. She carried a sense of peace that was stronger than any victory. She no longer doubted whether she belonged in the gym. She no longer felt crushed by whispers or laughter. She had faced them, not with anger, but with skill and patience. That alone gave her a deep sense of freedom. The black belt who had once ridiculed her avoided her at first. The humiliation of being submitted in front of everyone was heavy for him. Yet after a few days, he began to treat her differently. He no longer smirked when he looked at her. Instead, he nodded respectfully when they passed each other. One evening, when the class ended, he even walked over and quietly said, "Good work." It was only 2 words, but coming from him, it meant more than long speeches. It was his way of admitting she had earned his respect. Other students began to watch her more carefully during training. They noticed her focus, her calmness, and the way she never complained even when drills were difficult. Some of the same people who had once laughed now asked to partner with her, curious about how she moved. They were surprised to find that she trained with patience and kindness, never showing arrogance, never trying to humiliate anyone. She helped them as much as she could, explaining small details she had learned from her late-night practices. The coach too seemed proud of her, though he never said it directly. Instead, he gave her more responsibility in class, pairing her with newer students so she could guide them through the basics. She remembered how lost she had felt on her first day, standing awkwardly in her borrowed GI, not knowing what to do. So when beginners arrived, nervous and shy, she greeted them with kindness. She showed them patience, reminding them that everyone starts somewhere, and no one should feel ashamed of being a beginner. Her victory over the black belt was a turning point, but what came after mattered even more. She could have let the respect go to her head, but she didn't. She stayed humble, reminding herself that the journey was not about being better than others but about being better than she had been yesterday. Every time she stepped on the mat, she carried that lesson with her. Outside the gym, she also noticed changes. She walked more confidently, her steps steady and her shoulders relaxed. Challenges at work, disagreements, or moments of stress no longer shook her as before. She used the same patience she had learned in Jiu-Jitsu: breathe, stay calm, wait for the right moment to deal with life's problems. Friends and family noticed the difference. They said she seemed stronger, not just in body but in spirit. She smiled when they said that, because she knew it was true. The biggest lesson she carried was simple but powerful: strength does not come from being loud or being seen. True strength grows quietly, through persistence, through patience, and through the courage to continue when others doubt you. She had entered the gym as someone who was ridiculed, someone who didn't belong. But by refusing to give up, she had transformed not only how others saw her but also how she saw herself. There were still days when training was hard, when her body ached, and when she felt tired. But now, those days did not discourage her. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come. She remembered the laughter, the smirks, the times she almost quit. And then she remembered the 14 seconds that silenced it all. That memory gave her the strength to keep moving forward. The story of her submission spread beyond the gym. Other academies heard about it, and people began to admire her even if they had never met her. She became a quiet inspiration, especially for other women who wanted to train but were too afraid to try. Some reached out, asking how she had found the courage to continue despite ridicule. She told them the truth: that she had been scared, that she had been mocked, but that she had chosen not to quit. Her message was always the same: you don't need to be strong when you start. You only need to keep going. In time, She became a role model without even trying. She did not seek attention, but her story spoke for itself. The very people who had once doubted her now shared her story as an example of persistence. The gym began to feel different too. The atmosphere grew kinder, less dismissive, because her journey had shown everyone that underestimating someone could lead to being surprised. She often reflected on the irony of it all. She had entered Jiu-Jitsu simply to find strength within herself, never to prove anything to anyone. Yet in chasing that simple goal, she had ended up teaching everyone else a lesson. It was not about belts, ranks, or titles. It was about heart. Sometimes, when class ended and she bowed with the others, she glanced at the black belt she had once submitted. He no longer looked at her with arrogance. Instead, his eyes carried respect, even a touch of humility. She did not see him as an enemy or rival. She saw him as part of her journey, someone who had unknowingly pushed her to work harder. Without his ridicule, she might never have trained so fiercely. Without his doubt, she might not have discovered her own hidden strength. Her story became more than just about one victory. It became a reminder that life often puts us in places where others may laugh at us, where we feel small and out of place. But if we hold on, if we keep moving forward, we can turn those moments into something powerful. She had been ridiculed, but she had turned that ridicule into fuel. She had been doubted, but she had turned that doubt into proof. Years later, when she looked back, she didn't remember only the 14 seconds. She remembered the long nights of practice, the bruises, the whispers, and the decision she had made each day to return to the mat. That was the true victory, the victory over herself. And so, the simple woman who once felt out of place in a jiu-jitsu class became an example of quiet determination. She did not boast, she did not seek applause, but her story lived on, told again and again by those who had witnessed it. To her, the lesson was clear: greatness is not measured by how loudly you shine in front of others, but by how deeply you believe in yourself when no one else does. She had been ridiculed, but she had found her answer not in anger, not in quitting, but in patience, persistence, and the courage to keep going. And in the end, she had shown the world and herself that even the most ordinary person can do something extraordinary when they refuse to give up.